Breaking news, UK inflation fell to 3.4% in February, down 0.6% on the month before, and that is the lowest inflation rate in over 2 years. Martin, what has fed into this, do you think?
Well, this is mainly about household prices coming down that we knew were coming. What's interesting is this is 3.4%. The consensus was 3.5%. So certainly I think the Chancellor will be pleased because it's come down slightly lower than expected. And it's always about how it correlates to the expectations. What we have to remember is in April, we're going to see inflation drop again because we know the energy price cap is dropping by 12%, which factors into it a lot. And that could get them close to the 2% target figure. Now, in real terms, what does this mean? It means prices are still rising.
Yes.
They're still going up 3.4%, and that's on top of the 10% rises roughly we had this time last year. So things are still overall a lot more expensive than they were. It does not mean things are getting cheaper, and politicians tend to use clever phrases about that. Things are still getting more expensive. They're just not getting as expensive as quickly as they did before. I'm just hearing the underlying inflation rate, which arguably for economists is more important, which gets out all the sort of variables that move, has dropped from 5.1 to 4.8%. So still quite high and not quite as big a drop as we're seeing on everything else. One
of the levers that we have in order to bring inflation down is that the Bank of England has been raising interest rates, of course. When do they next meet? And will this mean that they could cut interest rate? Tomorrow and unlikely. Okay. So there's actually, I think it's still generally, and nobody knows, they could change, it's a decision made tomorrow. The general consensus is they will hold UK interest rates at 5.25%. Now, I'm going to do something brave now and talk a little bit of economics here, right? What they're trying to do with interest rates is they want to tighten things fiscally. That's sort of what the argument is. They should bring interest rates down to tighten things, to keep control of what's going on. But if you think about it, if interest rates are at 5.2% and inflation has dropped from 4% to 3.4%, the gap has grown, so real interest rates have just gone up, because real interest rates are the difference between the UK interest rates and inflation. And as inflation has gone down, you actually sort of have put interest rates up. And if you hold them where you are, you've kept interest rates pretty high. So, you know, we suspect they'll keep it for a while longer, and that will continue to squeeze the economy and probably bring inflation down further. Did that make sense? Yes, it makes sense. Our political correspondent Louisa James is in Westminster. Of course, inflation and cutting it is one of Rishi Sunak's 5 targets. So good news for him.
Yeah, undoubtedly it is positive news, but I think you will get cautious optimism from Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, when we hear from him in the next hour. I think you'll hear those kind of phrases we've heard before about the economy starting to turn a corner, the plan starting to work, because I think they do have to be careful to strike the right balance between being optimistic and giving people hope and not sounding out of touch with the reality that many people face, that things are still very difficult. Because while you can, of course, point to the hard facts about inflation coming down and the economy beginning to emerge from recession, you can also point to plenty of hard facts showing that people are still very much struggling. We know that childcare is up 7% in the last year. Millions of people are going to be coming off fixed mortgage rate deals and paying higher costs every month. And of course, prices at the supermarkets are still going up, and people are feeling that in their pockets. And we spoke to some people yesterday who told us just that.
Look, colossal is oil, you know, extra virgin olive oil. You're paying now £5 something, where before we were paying £3 something for that.
Found them to be very high and steady at the moment. I'm not seeing anything dropping.
Fruit and veg abound is getting pricey. Like, you know, your oranges, apples, that used to be dirt cheap, but now the prices are scandalous.
Well, that is perfect, really, illustration, really, of what a hard sell it is going to be for a government which wants to fight this election on the economy. The Prime Minister says that the country is going to bounce back this year, and he needs his MPs to believe that, and he needs voters to believe that if we're going to get an election in October, as his Chancellor is predicting.
Louisa, thanks very much indeed. Millions of drivers could be owed thousands of pounds after the financial regulator launched an investigation into car finance mis-selling. The Financial Conduct Authority is looking into whether consumers were charged inflated prices for car loans before January 2021. Now, Martin, you have seen 1.2 million complaints on this issue in the last month, but there are some people at home who may never have heard of it. So what exactly is car finance mis-selling?
Right, so let me take you through it before we start answering some of the questions. I've got a graphic summary here. So first of all, this is for anyone who got a car, a van, a camper van or motorbike on car finance. I'm talking specifically PCP or hire purchase deals. If you did a lease, it is not you. And it had to be for personal use between April 2007, that's a bit of a stretch, but that's the furthest you can go back, and the 28th of January 2021. Now, around 40% of those had what's called a discretionary commission arrangement, and that's what this is all about. It's where the lender said to dealers and brokers, you can increase your interest rates, and if you do, you'll get more commission. So they increased the interest rate to get a discretionary commission, and you weren't told about it. So what's happening? Well, first of all, these discretionary commission arrangements were banned in 2021. The FCA has launched an investigation this January that is due to report in September. Now, my view is it would not have done that unless it thought there were potentially systemic, wide-scale mis-selling of this. This is quite an unprecedented thing it's doing here. And in fact, the boss of the regulator said this week, it's improbable they won't find wrongdoing. So what do you do? Well, the first thing to do is find out if you had a DCA. Then my view is that you should get a complaint in now and not wait until September. Why? Because it is possible there will be a time bar. There will be something that says you have to get your complaint in time. So the sooner you get your complaint in, the better. And you can do this for free online. You don't have to pay anyone. My website has a tool that does it, and there are other places that will help you out there. And the general belief is millions of people may be due thousands of pounds back.
Wow. Right, so huge number of questions on this, Martin, which will come as no surprise to you whatsoever.
No,
so
I think we've had 2,000 questions, haven't we, just on this subject alone?
Incredible. So Karen on Facebook kicks it off. She received an email confirming she had the discretionary commission and that they would treat it as a complaint. The email said the company will contact her after September the 25th and that she has 15 months to then refer it to the Ombudsman. Can you explain to Karen and everyone else what this means? Does she get anything automatically or does she have to go to the Ombudsman herself?
Karen, you've done everything you need to do right now. OK, so what I've been suggesting people do is you find out if you had a DCA, tick, you had a DCA, you had this extra commission potentially charged in order that the extra interest rate potentially charged, and then you have logged your complaint. Nothing now happens until the 25th of September when the regulator reports. At that point, it might say, first of all, everybody who's ever had one of these gets the money back. I think that's unlikely, but there is some slight talk that that could happen. What's more likely to say is they will say to firms, you have to deal with complaints in this specific way and you have to pay people out in this specific way. I don't know what the specific way is yet, because that's what the investigation is. But you've done what I think you need to do, which is you've logged your complaint, you had a DCA, and now get on with your life until the 25th of September when the FCA reports. And at that point, once I know what it's done, then I will tell you what I think you should be doing then.
So if you are in Karen's position where she's had an email confirming the DCA and that it will be treated as a complaint, then you just need to hold tight.
Job's done.
It will be being dealt with. You don't need to do anything else.
This is all about what now the regulator might decide there wasn't systemic mis-selling and nothing will happen. But you've got your complaint in so that if it does decide, it's less likely you will be time barred out.
Andy on Instagram says it's been more than 28 days since submitting a complaint. What happens if you have not yet heard back from the finance company?
Well, it depends. So I've got data on all the finance companies here. I don't know which one it is. So the biggest one, for example, Black Horse said which is part of Lloyd's,
yes,
which is 16% of the complaints I've had through, says you should receive an acknowledgement within 28 days of the initial email, and then you should be told if you had a DCA. Right. after that, but it can't give a timescale. It will update every 28 days. Someone like Volkswagen, the second biggest, says you should have got an immediate auto response, and then you should be told if you had a DCA within 6 weeks of your initial email. Now, the letter people sent, if they use the complaint tool that's online, gave firms 28 days to get back to them.
Right.
The truth is, this has been far bigger than I expected, and I expected it to be far bigger than the firms, and many of them have simply been blown away by the numbers of people complaining. As long as you've got your letter in and had an acknowledgement of receipt within 28 days, I don't actually think there's a need to push it, because it means if you had the DCA, your complaint will be logged. If you've not had an acknowledgement, if they haven't said to you, we've got your email and we're dealing with it, then if it's over 28 days, you may want to get back in touch with them and say, I want to know that this has, you're processing.
OK. So the answer to Andy is, if you haven't heard anything, get back in touch with them.
But if they've sent you, we've got your email and we're dealing with it.
Got it.
I mean, the fact is there's no point in pushing that hard when they simply are not set up to deal with them as quickly as the explosion of numbers that we've had.
Another Andy asks via Facebook, he says he has heard back from the finance company, and the finance company said it was never in his agreement. Should he stick with this answer or take it further for more checks?
If just to be clear, if he's saying they say he didn't have a DCA, you didn't have a DCA. You may have been missold in other ways, but the systemic misselling isn't you. For regulated firms to lie would be absolutely off the charts, outrageous. I mean, there's always a potential of a data glitch that they've got the data wrong, but if they have, you will always have a chance to come back. So in most cases, if they say you haven't got a DCA, and there's no way to know unless they tell you, then you didn't have one, and the regulator is looking at this and investigating this, so it is very unlikely they're not telling you the truth.
So if you have been told by your finance company you did not have a DCA, then your complaint
Get on with your life.
proceed. OK. Letitia on Facebook says that it would be good if it applies to caravan finance as well.
Well, I've got a change of line on this, because it doesn't... The systemic investigation does not apply to caravan finance. But Sarah from the Debt Camel website, who I was talking to the other day, she rightly said, while this investigation doesn't apply, we know that the regulator doesn't like discretionary commission arrangements. So if you had a discretionary commission arrangement on your caravan, while it's not covered by this, you could still make a complaint and you could still take it to the Ombudsman in the normal way. So it's not part of this, but you might want to make a formal complaint to find out if you had a DCA on the caravan.
And Heather on Facebook says her husband signed for the car, but he has since died. She paid off the outstanding finance. The car is now in her name. Is she able to make the claim?
Yes, she will have to have the death certificate and prove that she's the rightful person to take it on. But the fact that her husband took it out and he's now passed away, then yes, she will be able to make a claim on his behalf.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. More questions on that, and I know that you'll be using every opportunity to try and answer them. Martin, thank you very much indeed. We'll get to more of those at the end of the programme. You've been getting in touch all morning with your questions for Martin. There's one on child benefit following the Chancellor announcing changes in the budget. Steve says he earns £75,000. His wife doesn't earn anything. Will they still have to repay their child benefits?
Certainly for this year, you will, because you're over £50,000, which means your child benefit is taken away from you. It's the highest individual earner. Next year, so this April, I mean, next month, next tax year, the threshold is £60,000 to £80,000. So you'll have to repay some of your child benefit, but you won't have to repay all of it. And then the thing I campaign for, from April 2026, they're going to look at a household income measurement, but that is out for consultation. We don't know how to work. But it's slightly better for you from the start of April, because this year, because you're within the new threshold, £60,000 to £80,000, you can still get some.
Rob on X says he got a reply from one of his claims on car finance saying they'd checked records, they did pay a discretionary commission to the dealer. They said they'll be in touch after 25th of September. And he says, thank you. Lucy, though, asks, what if you don't have your paperwork anymore?
Then go onto your credit file and your old bank statements to find some documentation or any form of detail of what it was. Then get in touch with the lender. The regulator says they must make best efforts to try and track you down. So any bit of evidence, even just trying to remember, I think it was about this time, I think it was with you, get in touch with them. They're supposed to try and trace you.
Jamie says one of the finance companies was taken over by another company. The new company says they have no details, despite Jamie providing all the original paperwork. If they took over, should the new company act?
Absolutely. They're talking boulder-dash baloney and other B words I can think of. You have an absolute right. If they have the liability, you've got your paperwork, they should be dealing with it. If they don't, well, from September, certainly with the FCA, we'll be cracking down on that, but I'd go back to them.
Martin, great to have you with us this morning.